Nathan Ross had imagined this moment 1,000 times. 5 years of grinding through double shifts at a Dubai construction firm, 5 years of cheap noodles and cramped labor housing, 5 years of sending 80% of every paycheck back home. Also, his family could build the house he'd promised his mother before he left. He'd pictured her opening the door, tears in her eyes, pulling him into a hug that smelled like cardamom and home. Instead, he stood on the sidewalk outside a house he didn't recognize as his own, suitcase handle sweating in his palm, watching his younger brother Kevin lean against the porch railing like he owned the place. Because, as it turned out, he did. Nathan. Kevin said his name flatly, the way you'd greet a delivery driver. "You're back early." "Early? I told Mom my flight date 3 weeks ago." Nathan's eyes moved past his brother to the freshly painted shutters, the new welcome mat, the potted plants lining steps he'd wired money to pour concrete for. "Whose name is on the deed, Kevin?" Kevin didn't even flinch. "Mine. Dad transferred it last year." "You weren't here. Someone had to manage things." The words landed like a slap delivered so casually it took a second to register as violence. Nathan had wired $40,000 over 5 years. Every cent earned pouring concrete under desert sun, sending it home with a single instruction. "Build the house. Put my name on the title. I'm coming back for it." His mother appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her dupatta, her smile brittle. "Beta, you're here. Come inside, sit." "Whose house is this, Sammy?" Nathan asked quietly. Too quietly. The kind of quiet that used to make his father nervous when Nathan was a boy and someone had wronged him. Because Nathan never yelled. He went silent, and silence in his family had always meant something was coming. His mother's eyes darted to Kevin, then to the ground. "Beta, it's complicated. Kevin got married. He needed stability, a place to bring his wife. I sent the money for that house every single month." Nathan's voice didn't rise. It dropped, flattened, the tone of a man doing math in his head. "I have the transfer receipts. Every rupee." "You weren't here," Kevin repeated, as if it were a legal argument. "I was. I handled the contractors, the inspections, the paperwork. Money isn't ownership, by presence is." Nathan looked at his brother for a long moment, really looked the way you look at a stranger you're trying to memorize. Then he picked up his suitcase and turned back toward the street. "Nathan, where are you going?" "It's your first night back," his mother called. "To find a hotel," he said, without turning around, "since apparently I don't have a house anymore." He didn't slam the gate. He didn't raise his voice. He simply walked, each step measured, calculating, already 3 moves ahead. Somewhere behind him, he heard his mother crying and his brother muttering he'll cool down to no one in particular. Kevin had no idea what he'd just started, because Nathan Ross hadn't spent 5 years abroad only pouring concrete. He'd spent them learning contract law from a Pakistani-origin lawyer he'd befriended on-site, studying property registration loopholes during his lunch breaks, and most critically, never once sending that $40,000 as a gift. Every transfer had a paper trail. Every message to his father said the same 4 words: "For my house, Abu." He checked into a budget hotel 11 minutes from the house he'd built with his own blistered hands, opened his laptop, and began pulling up 5 years of bank statements. The silence that had followed him out the gate wasn't defeat. It was the sound of a plan beginning. The hotel room was small, the mattress thin, but Nathan barely noticed. He'd spread 5 years of financial history across the bed like a general planning a siege. Bank statements, wire transfer confirmations, WhatsApp screenshots, even the voice notes he'd saved on a cloud drive out of habit. "Beta, send 800 more. The contractor wants advance payment for the roof." "Nathan, the tile guy is asking for the money today. Can you transfer now?" "Don't worry, Beta. The house will be yours. Your father promised." Every message from his father, preserved. Every promise, time-stamped. Nathan had learned, working construction sites where labor contracts were routinely renegotiated after the work was done, that verbal promises meant nothing and paper trails meant everything. He'd been building his own kind of foundation the whole time. Not concrete and rebar, but evidence. At 6 a.m., his phone buzzed. His father. "Beta, come home. We need to talk like a family." Nathan almost laughed. Like a family. as if a family was something you invoked only when convenient, when you needed him to write checks, but not when you needed to include him in decisions about his own house. He went anyway, because he wanted to watch their faces when he laid out exactly what he knew. His father, Imran Ross, sat at the head of the dining table looking older than Nathan remembered, gray creeping fully into his beard now. Kevin sat beside him, arms crossed, already defensive. His mother hovered near the kitchen doorway, unwilling to fully commit to either side of the room. "Nathan bade us sit," his father said. "Let's not make this into a war. I'm not the one who transferred a house I paid for into someone else's name without telling me," Nathan said, taking a seat but not touching the tea his mother placed in front of him. "So whatever war this is, I didn't start it. Kevin needed the house for his marriage. You were abroad. Practically speaking, I have 41 wire transfers over 5 years, every single one labeled for construction of the house at this address." Nathan slid his phone across the table, the spreadsheet open. "Practically speaking, I have voice notes of you asking for specific amounts for specific stages of construction. Foundation, roof, tiling. Practically speaking, Abu, I have everything." Kevin's jaw tightened. "So what? You're going to sue your own father?" "I haven't decided what I'm going to do yet," Nathan said, and that was the truth. "But I want you both to understand something clearly. I am not the naive boy who left 5 years ago believing that sending money home automatically meant loyalty would be returned. I've learned a few things abroad. Contract law, for one. Property registration fraud, for another." Fraud. His father's face paled slightly. Transferring property funded entirely by someone else's documented remittances into a different family member's name, without the funder's knowledge or consent, that has a name, Abu. I looked it up. Several names, actually, depending on which angle a lawyer wants to pursue. The room went silent. His mother's hand trembled around the teapot she was still holding. "You wouldn't," Kevin said, but his voice cracked slightly on the second word. "I would rather not," Nathan corrected. "There's a difference. I'd rather this family fix what it broke without me having to prove anything in front of a judge. But I need everyone at this table to understand. I am not asking for the house back as a favor. I am telling you I have a legal claim to it, and I intend to use it if this isn't resolved fairly." He stood, leaving the tea untouched, and looked at his brother one last time. "You had 5 years to build a relationship with me instead of just a house. You chose the house. Let's see how that works out for you." He walked out again. This time, no one called after him. Farah Aziz had built her reputation on cases nobody else wanted. Property disputes tangled in family loyalty, the kind of cases where the law was clear but the emotions were a minefield. When Nathan walked into her office with a folder thick enough to double as a doorstop, she recognized the look on his face immediately. Not anger. Certainty. "Walk me through it," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Nathan laid it out in the same measured tone he'd used with his family. Dates, amounts, message logs, the property transfer document Kevin had foolishly shown him a photo of during a moment of overconfidence weeks earlier when he'd first floated the idea of getting married in the house. Farah flipped through the documents with the quiet focus of someone assembling a puzzle she already suspected the shape of. "This is strong," she said finally. "Documented remittances tied explicitly to construction phases, verbal promises captured in writing and audio, and a title transfer that happened without your knowledge or signature while you held demonstrable financial interest. Depending on how the original property was structured, we may have grounds for a constructive trust claim, or even fraud, if we can show your father knowingly misrepresented the ownership arrangement to secure your continued payments." "I don't want to destroy my father," Nathan said quietly. "I want the house, and I want them to understand they can't do this to people just because those people love them enough to stay quiet." Farah studied him for a moment. "Most clients who walk in here wanting revenge don't say that sentence. Most of them just want blood. I don't want blood. I want what's mine, and I want them to feel, for once, what it's like to have something taken from you by someone who claims to love you." Nathan's voice remained calm, but something in his eyes had hardened into flint. "There's a difference between revenge and consequence, isn't there?" "There is," Farah agreed. "Consequence is what happens when someone follows the actions all the way through. Revenge is when you engineer the fallout yourself." Sounds like you're aiming for the first. I've had 5 years to think about how I wanted to do this, Nathan said. I'm not interested in shortcuts. Farah began drafting a formal legal notice that afternoon. Not a lawsuit yet, but a preliminary demand letter establishing Nathan's financial claim to the property and requesting a formal resolution within 30 days, with an explicit warning that failure to respond would result in a civil suit for constructive trust and potential fraud charges against his father. She also recommended something Nathan hadn't considered: a forensic accountant to formally trace and total every remittance, converting 5 years of informal family transactions into an undeniable financial paper trail no court could dismiss as sentiment or misunderstanding. This will take time, Farah warned. Legal processes always do. Are you prepared for that? For the waiting, for the family gossip, for people calling you greedy for wanting back what you paid for? I've spent 5 years pouring concrete in 50-degree heat while my family slowly convinced themselves I didn't matter as much as the son who stayed, Nathan said. I can survive some gossip. That evening, back in his hotel room, Nathan received a message from an unknown number. It was his sister-in-law, Mahira, Kevin's wife, someone he'd never actually met in person, only seen in wedding photos his mother had sent. Nathan, I think you should know something about how the transfer really happened. Can we talk somewhere Kevin won't find out? Nathan stared at the message for a long moment before typing back a single word. Where? Whatever was coming next, he had a feeling it would change everything. They met at a small cafe on the edge of town, far enough from the family neighborhood that no one would recognize them together. Mahira arrived first, wrapped in a plain shawl, sunglasses on despite the overcast sky, the universal disguise of someone terrified of being seen. Thank you for coming, she said as Nathan sat down. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. Nathan ordered nothing, unwilling to pretend this was a social visit. What did you want to tell me? Mahira wrapped both hands around her cooling cup of chai, staring into it like it held the courage she needed. Kevin didn't just take the house because your father offered it. He pushed for it. He told your father that you probably weren't coming back, that men who go abroad for years sometimes just start new lives there, forget home. He said it would be practical to transfer everything into his name before you could get any ideas about coming back and claiming ownership. Nathan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, letting her continue. There's something else. Mahira's voice dropped lower. The wire transfers you sent, not all of it went to the house. Kevin diverted a portion of it, almost $15,000 over 2 years, into a private investment scheme his friend was running. It failed. He lost most of it. He never told your parents. He told them the money went entirely into construction costs that were higher than expected. The cafe noise faded into background static as Nathan processed this. $15,000. Money he'd sent believing every rupee was going into tile, cement, and rebar, had instead vanished into some friend's failed business scheme while his brother lied to their parents about rising costs. Why are you telling me this? Nathan asked finally. You're his wife. This puts you at risk if he finds out. Mahira's eyes met his, steady despite the fear underneath. Because I married into this family believing it was built on loyalty and hard work. Instead, I've watched Kevin lie to his own parents for 2 years to cover his mistakes. Watched your mother stay silent because she's too afraid of conflict to hold anyone accountable, and watched your father slowly convince himself that whatever decision benefits the son who's physically present must be the right one. I don't want to raise children in a house built on lies, Nathan. I'd rather it collapse now and get rebuilt honestly than stand for another decade pretending everything is fine. Nathan sat back, processing not just the information but the courage it took to deliver it. Will you testify to this? If it comes to that, I have screenshots, Mahira said, sliding her phone across the table, already unlocked to a folder of saved messages between Kevin and his investment friend, dated across 2 years, discussing the loan from Nathan's remittances and the subsequent losses. I saved everything the moment I realized what he was doing. I didn't know what I'd do with it. I think I always knew someday it would matter. Nathan looked at the screenshots, then back at Mahira. Something had shifted in his chest, not triumph exactly, but a grim clarity. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about a pattern of deception that had been quietly corroding his family for years while everyone smiled through dinners and pretended otherwise. "Thank you," he said finally, "for trusting me with this." "Just get what's yours," Mahira said, standing to leave before anyone could spot them together. "And when the truth comes out, don't let them convince you that you're the villain for telling it." Nathan watched her walk away, then opened his phone and forwarded the screenshots to Farah with a single message. "We need to talk. This is bigger than I thought." Farah didn't waste time. Within a week, she converted Mahira's evidence into a supplementary legal filing alongside the original property claim, and she drafted a second demand letter. This one addressed not just to Nathan's father, but explicitly naming Kevin's misappropriation of remitted funds as a separate matter that could constitute financial fraud against Nathan directly. "We could go straight to filing," Farah told Nathan during their strategy session. "But given the family history and Mahira's involvement, I'd recommend one more attempt at a mediated conversation first. Sometimes people who won't respond to legal pressure will respond to the threat of public family shame, especially fathers who care deeply about reputation in their community." Nathan agreed, though not out of mercy. He wanted his father to hear the full truth from his own mouth, in front of everyone, before any court got involved. He wanted Kevin to understand that the walls he'd built out of lies had a foundation as fragile as the promises he'd made. The family meeting happened on a Sunday evening, in the same dining room where Nathan had first laid out his financial claim. This time, he brought Farah with him, a professional presence his father hadn't anticipated, sitting quietly at the end of the table with a folder of her own. "What's she doing here?" Kevin asked immediately, eyes narrowing. "She's my lawyer," Nathan said simply. "I thought it was time everyone understood exactly how serious this has become." His father's face tightened with the particular anxiety of a proud man realizing his authority was slipping. "Nathan, is this really necessary? We're trying to resolve this as a family. We tried that, Abu. I came to you with proof, and you asked me not to make it a war. So I did what people do when good faith conversation fails. I got professional help." Nathan glanced at Kevin. "And in the process, I learned something else. Something about where exactly my money went." Kevin's face shifted almost imperceptibly, but Nathan caught it. The flicker of a man realizing his secret wasn't secret anymore. $15,000, Nathan said, voice level. "Invested in a scheme with your friend Hamza. Lost within 18 months. Money you told our parents went into rising construction costs." The silence that followed was so complete Nathan could hear the ceiling fan clicking overhead. "Kevin," their father said slowly, turning to face his younger son, "is this true?" Kevin's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "It was supposed to be temporary. Hamza said the returns would cover the gap before Nathan even noticed." "Before I noticed?" Nathan's voice finally rose, just slightly, the first crack in 5 years of careful composure. "You were gambling with money I earned pouring concrete under 50-degree heat. Money I sent believing it was building a home for this family. And your plan was to hope I never noticed?" His mother had gone pale, one hand pressed to her mouth. His father looked, for the first time in Nathan's memory, genuinely lost. A man realizing the son he'd trusted to manage things had been managing them into the ground. "I have documentation," Farah said calmly, breaking the silence. Message logs between Kevin and his associate discussing the diverted funds, time-stamped bank records showing the losses, and testimony available from a witness within the household. This is no longer simply a property dispute. This is financial fraud committed against your son while he worked abroad specifically to support this family. "You'd really do this to your own brother?" Kevin's voice cracked, desperation finally breaking through his earlier arrogance. "Dragged the family through court? I didn't do this to you," Nathan said quietly. "You did this to yourself. I'm just the first person willing to hold up a mirror and make everyone look." News in a tight-knit neighborhood travels faster than any legal notice. Within days, extended relatives began calling. Aunts who hadn't spoken to Nathan in years suddenly concerned about family unity, uncles offering unsolicited opinions about how boys shouldn't drag each other to court. Nathan let the calls go to voicemail. He'd learned, over 5 years of quiet solitude abroad, that the loudest voices in a crisis were rarely the ones who'd actually helped carry the weight. His mother called every day, sometimes crying, sometimes pleading, occasionally attempting the old tactic of guilt. After everything I did raising you, this is how you repay me? Nathan had a simple, steady response each time. I'm not punishing you, Amy. I'm asking for honesty. If you want this resolved without lawyers, then help make it right without lawyers. But I won't pretend nothing happened just because pretending is more comfortable for everyone else. His father, to his credit, seemed to be the one person actually reckoning with the weight of what had occurred. He showed up at Nathan's hotel unannounced one evening, alone, without Kevin, and sat in the small lobby looking older and smaller than Nathan had ever seen him. I made a mistake, Imran said, staring at his hands. I believed your brother because he was here, in front of me, every day, and you were a voice on a phone screen from thousands of miles away. It was easier to trust what I could see. That's not trust, Abu. That's convenience. Nathan sat across from him, no longer angry, just tired. Trust would have been calling me before transferring a house I paid for. Trust would have been asking questions when Kevin's construction costs mysteriously ballooned. You didn't trust him more than me. You just found it easier not to ask hard questions. His father was quiet for a long moment. What do you want from me now? I want the title corrected to reflect the truth, that the house was funded by my remittances, and ownership should reflect that. I want Kevin to acknowledge formally what he did with the diverted funds, and I want a plan for him to repay it, even if it takes years. And I want this family to stop treating honesty like it's a weapon only used against people we're angry at, instead of a baseline we all deserve. And if Kevin refuses, then the court decides instead of us. And I promise you, Abu, courts don't care about anyone's feelings. They care about paper trails, and I have 5 years of them. His father nodded slowly, the fight visibly draining out of him. I'll talk to him. I'll talk to your mother. Give us until the end of the week. Nathan agreed, though he didn't fully believe it would be that simple. Kevin had spent 2 years lying convincingly enough to fool their own parents. A few days of pressure from a guilt-ridden father wasn't likely to undo that pattern of deflection overnight. He was right to be skeptical. 3 days later, Farah called him with news that changed the calculation entirely. Kevin just tried to quietly sell a portion of the property to a third-party buyer, she said, apparently hoping to liquidate his claim before any formal resolution locks in the ownership dispute. Fortunately, the moment we filed the demand letter, I placed a caveat on the title preventing any transaction without court clearance. His buyer's lawyer just called mine, very confused about why the deal fell through. Nathan closed his eyes, feeling something between exhaustion and grim vindication settle over him. He was never going to make this right voluntarily, he said quietly. Was he? Some people only understand consequence once it's already arrived at their door, Farah said. I think it's time we filed formally. The courtroom was smaller than Nathan expected. No grand marble halls, just a modest municipal building with fluorescent lighting and the low hum of an overworked air conditioner. Farah had prepared him thoroughly. What to expect, how the judge would likely respond to the strength of their documentation, how Kevin's lawyer would probably attempt to argue familial intent over strict financial accounting. Kevin arrived with a lawyer Nathan didn't recognize, young, clearly inexperienced with cases this document-heavy, visibly overwhelmed by the sheer volume of evidence Farah had compiled. Their father sat in the gallery, not beside Kevin, not beside Nathan, but alone in the middle, a man who'd finally run out of ways to avoid choosing a side. The hearing moved faster than Nathan anticipated. Farah presented the remittance records first. 41 transactions over 5 years, each labeled explicitly for construction purposes, cross-referenced against the actual construction timeline and contractor invoices Mahira had quietly helped gather from Kevin's own files. The pattern is unambiguous, Your Honor, Farah said, addressing the judge with the calm precision Nathan had come to rely on. My client's remittances directly funded 100% of the property's construction costs. The subsequent title transfer occurred without his knowledge, consent, or signature, in direct contradiction to explicit written and verbal agreements documented across 5 years of correspondence. Kevin's lawyer attempted to argue that verbal family agreements didn't constitute binding legal contracts, that the transfer had been a legitimate decision made by the property's legal guardian, their father, and that Nathan's absence abroad meant he'd implicitly delegated decision-making authority to those physically present. The judge, a stern woman who'd clearly seen every variation of family property dispute imaginable, was unimpressed. Delegated authority requires evidence of delegation, she said dryly. I see 5 years of the plaintiff explicitly stating his intentions in writing. I see no evidence he ever relinquished his claim. What I do see, however, is a secondary allegation regarding misappropriated funds. Counsel, does your client wish to address the $15,000 discrepancy directly, or shall we proceed with forensic accounting testimony? Kevin's face went ashen. His lawyer requested a brief recess, clearly hoping to negotiate rather than let the forensic accountant's testimony, already filed as evidence, become part of the permanent record. During the recess, Kevin approached Nathan in the hallway, something in his posture finally cracking open, the arrogance replaced by something closer to genuine desperation. Bye, please. If this goes on the record, it follows me forever. My reputation, Mahira's family's opinion of me, everything. Can we settle this outside? Nathan studied his brother, really studied him, searching for some trace of the boy he'd grown up with, the one who used to wait by the window for their father's car every evening. He found only fear now, fear of consequences finally catching up to actions taken in confident secrecy. I'm willing to settle, Nathan said finally, but not quietly and not on your terms. The title transfers back to me, formally, on record. You repay the diverted funds on a documented schedule enforceable by court order. And you tell Amy and Abba the truth, in full, without me having to say another word. Kevin's jaw tightened, old pride warring with new fear. But he nodded. Deal. The settlement was finalized within 2 weeks, faster than Farah had anticipated, largely because Kevin's lawyer recognized a losing case when forensic accounting testimony sat ready and waiting in the wings. The title transferred back to Nathan, formally, with his name etched into a legal document that no family argument or convenient memory lapse could ever again dispute. But Nathan understood something Farah had told him early on. Winning the legal battle was only half the resolution. The other half required something no court could order, an honest reckoning within the family itself. He called a final gathering, not at the house this time, but at a quiet restaurant, neutral ground where no one held home field advantage. His mother arrived first, eyes red-rimmed from what had clearly been weeks of crying. His father came next, looking like a man who'd aged a decade in a month. Kevin arrived last, Mahira beside him. Her presence a quiet act of solidarity Nathan deeply appreciated, given everything she'd risked to help him. I didn't call this meeting to gloat, Nathan said, once everyone had settled uncomfortably around the table. I called it because I think this family has spent so long avoiding hard conversations that we forgot how to have them at all. And I don't want to walk away from this with a house but no family. I'd rather have both, if that's still possible. His mother's hands trembled around her water glass. Beta, I'm sorry. I should have asked more questions. I should have protected what you built instead of assuming Kevin's version of things because he was here and you weren't. That wasn't fair to you. It wasn't. Nathan agreed simply, without cruelty, just acknowledgement. But I understand why it happened. Absence makes people invisible, even when they're the ones holding everything together financially. I don't blame you for trusting what was in front of you. I blame the assumption that trust doesn't require verification, especially when large sums of money and property are involved. His father cleared his throat, the weight of weeks of guilt evident in every word. I want you to know, despite everything, I am proud of the man you became abroad. Not because of the money you sent, though God knows we needed it, but because of how you handled all of this. You didn't scream. You didn't disappear in anger. You built a case, calmly, and you gave us every chance to make it right before forcing our hand. That's not something either your brother or I would have had the patience for. Kevin, silent until now, finally spoke, his voice smaller than Nathan had ever heard it. I'm not going to pretend I have some big excuse. I got scared when the investment failed, and instead of telling the truth, I dug the hole deeper because it felt easier than admitting I'd made a mistake with money that wasn't mine to risk. I'm sorry, Bai. Genuinely. I know sorry doesn't undo 2 years of lying, but it's what I have. Nathan looked around the table. His mother's guilt, his father's quiet pride, his brother's belated honesty, Mahira's steady presence beside a husband she'd risked exposing for the sake of truth. It wasn't the joyful homecoming he'd imagined 5 years ago, but it was perhaps something more valuable. A family finally being honest with each other, even if it had taken a courtroom to get there. "I'm not interested in punishing anyone forever," Nathan said finally. "I want the repayment schedule honored, Kevin. And I want us to actually talk to each other from now on. Not through money, not through assumptions, but through actual conversations. That's the only way this doesn't happen again, to any of us." Slowly, hesitantly, his mother reached across the table and took his hand. This time, when she cried, Nathan let himself lean into it instead of holding himself apart. 6 months later, Nathan stood in the doorway of the house he'd once watched his brother claim with careless entitlement. Except now, everything about it felt different. The title was legally his, filed, stamped, and unchallengeable. Kevin had made 3 payments on schedule toward the diverted funds, slower progress than Nathan might have liked, but real progress nonetheless. Mahira had given birth to a daughter Nathan visited every week, determined that whatever fractures existed between the brothers wouldn't extend into the next generation. His parents had moved into a smaller apartment nearby. Not out of punishment, but by mutual agreement, a chance for Nathan to finally live in the home he'd built without the daily reminder of how close he'd come to losing it entirely. His mother visited often, usually with food, usually staying longer than she originally planned, slowly rebuilding the closeness that 5 years and one betrayal had strained, but not permanently broken. Nathan had taken a local job managing construction projects, a natural transition given his years abroad, and one that let him stay close to the family he'd spent so long trying to protect from thousands of miles away. He'd learned, through everything, that protection wasn't just about sending money. It was about presence, about asking hard questions, about refusing to let comfort and avoidance replace honesty. Kevin visited on Sundays now, awkward at first, gradually less so. Their conversations remained careful, still healing, but real in a way they'd never quite been before. Because for the first time, neither brother was performing a version of family harmony that masked deeper resentments underneath. "I used to think you left because you didn't care about us enough to stay," Kevin admitted one Sunday evening, sitting on the same porch he'd once claimed as exclusively his own. "Turns out you cared more than any of us. You just cared in a way that required patience nobody else in this family had." "I cared enough to build something," Nathan said, looking out over the street where he'd once walked away with nothing but a suitcase and a plan. "I just had to learn that building something worth keeping means protecting it just as fiercely as you build it in the first place." The house stood behind him, not just brick and cement and the tile he'd funded from thousands of miles away, but proof of something larger. That quiet people weren't weak people. That patience wasn't passivity. That 5 years of silent sacrifice could, eventually, demand to be seen, documented, and honored. Not through anger, but through the unshakable weight of truth laid carefully, deliberately, brick by brick, until no one could deny what had been built. Nathan Ross had returned home after 5 years abroad to find his family had given his house away. He hadn't taken it back through screaming or through the kind of dramatic confrontation people expected from betrayal stories. He'd taken it back through patience, documentation, and an unshakable refusal to let convenience masquerade as truth. And as he stood on the porch of the house that had always, legally and morally, been his, he understood that the real victory wasn't the title now bearing his name. It was the version of himself he'd become in order to reclaim it.